Hi everyone. I've been wanting to make a proper presentation video for the Proxywars website for quite a while, so today I'm going to give you a quick tour and show you what you can do with it. This is the main page. You'll find some general information here, but if you want to start playing the wargame, the best thing to do is to go directly to the rulebook. Here, you have access to the full rulebook, with the different chapters, the initiation section, and everything you need to start playing. Some of the rules include diagrams to show exactly how things work, and there are also small helpers like this one, which let you calculate the rules you need to make. I won't spend too much time explaining how profiles work right now. Instead, let's go directly to an army list. Here, you can see one of the worlds with its own lore. Each faction works the same way. For example, if we open this faction, you can read its background, what kind of faction it is, and the different stages of its history. Below that, you have the troops you can recruit. Building an army list is very simple. You just increase the number of soldiers here, and the website automatically calculates the points, the number of entities, and the total army size. You can also select options. Of course, the available options depend on the number of troops you take, so they will adjust automatically if you reduce the unit size. Whenever you see special rules like this, you can click on them to see exactly what they do. The same thing works for the weapon special rules here. The idea is that this can be used directly during a game. Once you start building your army list, let's say you have something you like here, around 185 points, you can click here to display your full army list. If you click again, you go back to the army builder. The options you selected appear in yellow, so it is easy to see what has been added. And if you realize that you forgot to add a character, for example, you can simply add it here and the points will update automatically. There we go. Now we are at 300 points. At 300 points, you already have a decent small army. The only issue is that if you are not logged in, you cannot save your army. So to save it, you need to log in or create an account. Once you are logged in, your saved armies appear here. You can also change your avatar. There is a list of avatars you can choose from. Let's pick this one, just for fun. Here, you can also see the biomes you own, but we'll look at that later. For now, what matters is the army lists. If we open this army list, we can see all the different troops in the army, and we can manage the list from here. Now that we are logged in, it works exactly like before, except that we can save the army. You can see that it is now saved. I could also change the name here, and that would create a new army list. Another thing you can do is generate a random army. For example, I can say that I want a 600-point army, and the website will generate one using the different troops, characters, and options. Here, this is a named character, which is why there is a description. You can find more information about him in the lore. Then I can just save the army, and now I have a new army list with all the different troops. It will not always be exactly 600 points. In general, it is quite rare for the system to find the exact number of points, but it will try to get close. For example, if I want, I can delete this army. And if I go back to my account, I can see that the army I saved is now listed here. Now let's look at patrols. Patrols work a little differently. The system calculates the number of wounds in your patrol, because that is what matters most for the patrol rules. In this mode, knowing the number of wounds is more important than knowing the number of entities. Also, instead of buying soldiers by groups, you buy them one by one. This is really meant for small skirmish games with very few troops. The saving system works the same way. You can create a patrol, generate a 100-point patrol for example, save it, and it will appear in your account. Now, before we go further, I should probably explain very quickly how the game works. Let's take a unit where the profile is easy to read. Each troop has values like skill, dodge, and toughness. When a troop is attacked, it chooses whether to use the blue values or the red values. If it chooses the blue values, the attacker reduces its defense with precision. For example, the attacker might apply -1 to this value and -3 to this one. So let's imagine two units of spearmen fighting each other. The defender could choose to resist with toughness, so normally on a 6+, but then it would suffer a -3 modifier. That means each attack would wound on a 3+. And if the defender chose to dodge instead, using the close combat dodge value, it would also suffer a -1 modifier, so again it would be wounded on a 3+. In this case, no matter what the defender chooses, it would suffer 8 attacks wounding on 3+. After that, special rules are added. For example, here they would reroll ones because they are motivated. So the basic idea is really this choice between the blue values and the red values. A lot of the game flows from that. For example, if you fight heavily armored troops, you can end up facing armor values like 11+ or 12+. If your weapon is designed to reduce dodge, which means it is better against fragile but agile targets, then you will do almost nothing against this kind of armor. On the other hand, if you have artillery weapons that are made to hit extremely hard, with something like -12 toughness, then a heavily armored target like this Draco armor may be forced to use its blue value, which is not amazing. And it can take very heavy damage very quickly. So this system lets weapons be specialized. Some are better against tanks and heavy targets, while others are better against light troops. If you want to go back to the page with all the army lists, you can use this page. Most of the lists are already playable. There is just one small detail. When a list appears more transparent, with the name in yellow, it means that the list is not really complete yet. It has only a few troops, and there is still quite a bit of work to do on it. At the moment, there are 2 worlds available, and a third one is under construction. If you open a world, it works the same way. You have the lore of the world here, and then each faction below it. A lot of factions are still under construction. I know it can be a bit annoying that many faction images are AI generated, but this is a project I work on in my free time. It doesn't make money, and it has already cost me thousands and thousands of euros. So I really cannot afford to pay hundreds of euros for every single faction image. I try to keep AI generated images to a minimum, but for now it is the only realistic solution. So yes, sorry about that. Here you can see the different factions. This is the latest one I added. I am also working on the unit thumbnails so that it becomes much clearer which troop is which. The goal is to have something more like this, where you can immediately see the images of the different units. It makes army selection much easier. If you want to go deeper into the profiles, you also have the different categories here, with the rules that apply to each category. This is mostly for the background and the structure of the game, so it is not the most important thing when you are starting. You also have keywords, which can matter for some rules. The main idea is that during a game, you can keep your army list open and use it directly. You can also open a second page with the rules, so whenever you need to check a special rule you do not know yet, you can quickly look it up. And that is completely normal when you are starting. Now, if we continue through the site, another useful section for players is here. For example, you can choose the set here, and if you click Explore, it opens the drive with all the downloadable models. Then, on this other page, Gaming Accessories, you have access to something very useful for storing your troops: the squad clusters. If you use 4-drawer storage units, which is what I personally use for my miniatures, this is really practical. It is designed for that, and it makes it much easier to store your troops and take them out when you need them. Here, you also have movement trays for the game. Of course, you can always cut circles out of cardboard with a compass if you do not have a 3D printer, or you can buy acrylic circles of the right size. So these are not absolutely necessary. They are just here if you prefer having 3D printed movement trays. These are small tokens to mark bonuses, and make sure you do not forget them. And these are wound markers. Again, they are not strictly necessary, but they are easy to use and they are available for free here. Now let's continue with the website presentation. I was not necessarily planning to make this video about how to use the different builders, but since we are here, let's do it. Here, you can choose the building you want. Right now, this account does not own every collection. It only owns these 2 collections. So let's go to one of the collections I have, Fukai Forest. Now I can download the files. First, you choose the first floor. Once you select it, the second floor becomes available. For example, we can choose this second floor, then this third floor. Now we have our building and we can simply click download to get the files. But there are several options you should understand first. I know they are written on the page, but reading everything can be annoying, so I will explain them quickly. Here, you have one variation per floor. That means each floor will have one type of wall. This is useful if you do not want to download something too heavy, or if you want something easy to paint. Then you have maximum variations. This is more or less the default option. With this setting, almost every wall slot will use a different wall variation. Then you have no walls. This is useful if you have already downloaded the wall files before and do not want to download them again. It makes the download faster and saves bandwidth. Let's stay on maximum variations so I can show all the options. These options control which wall types are used on each floor. It depends on the biome, but in general you can choose to use first floor walls on the first floor, second floor walls on the second floor, and so on. In this biome, there are only two wall types, so it will only use those two. You can also choose to use only first floor walls, only second floor walls, or last floor walls if the biome has them. In this biome, there are only two types, so it depends on the collection. Now let's look at the open and closed wall options. You can choose to have open and closed walls, depending on how you want the building to play. You can also make all the walls open if you want to clearly see inside, or all the walls closed. Or you can have only the first floor walls closed while keeping the upper floors normal. Next, you can choose how you want to print the walls. If you choose PLA walls, then in most cases you are probably going for a full PLA building. The structure, the walls, and the other parts are all printed in PLA. Walls are then split into two pieces, with one part placed behind the other. Or you can choose resin walls. In that case, the walls will be printed in resin, while the main structure will usually be printed in PLA by default. If you have smaller printers, you can choose to cut the structure. This option lets you separate the pillars from the structure. You can even combine both options. This is very useful because, from time to time, the pillars are the parts that can fail or become annoying during printing. There is also another system where everything is printed as separate parts. This is mainly for full resin printing. It is not really meant for PLA. The idea is to print everything in resin, then assemble the building afterward. I have already printed quite a few buildings this way, and it works really well. You do not need to think too much about it. You print the parts, assemble them, and it allows for very modular results. Now let's assume we are using PLA. For example, we can choose to leave the first floor without a floor plate. Since the building is going to stand on the table anyway, you can save some printing time by using the table itself as the ground. And this works well for intact buildings. Then, if you are printing in resin, you can choose whether you want the supported files or the unsupported files, so you can add your own supports if you prefer. That is not really the main point for today, though. If you click here, it opens the drive with all the extra small elements included in the biome. I use this all the time. Depending on the biome, you will find different additional pieces. This is one style of building, but there are also other building systems. Let's switch again to a biome I own, for example military base. Here, you can choose the building you want to build. This system works differently. You click here, then here, and you can select between different building types. For example, if you select this building, you will download exactly the files you need to build it. The options are the same as before. These older options are still here to help you choose the building, but honestly, selecting it visually like this is much more practical. You can see exactly what you want, and then download it. Then there is the WTC Builder. Some of these sets are beautiful, but let's use one I own, for example Fukai Forest. Here, you just click on the piece you want. If you do not own it, the site will probably ask you to pledge. But since I own this one, I can simply click it and download it automatically. The options are the same here too. Everything works the same way. The main point is that you select the files you need depending on your printer and your printing setup. So that gives you a good overview of the builder and the main things you can do with it. If you want to play the wargame, this is probably the section that will interest you the most. I really recommend taking a look at the rulebook. I still need to add more videos and explanations, so this is only the beginning. But the idea is that when you read the rulebook, you do not have to read everything at once. I know some people will want to jump straight in, so the rules are color-coded. The rules in blue are really important. The rules in green are things you will probably see during your first games. The rules in brown are things you may only see after several games. And the rules in red are very specific. When they become relevant, you will know, but you do not need to read them immediately. There are several things in this game that are a bit different from other wargames. The turn structure uses alternating activations. Nowadays, that is not extremely original anymore, but when I started working on the game, it was not necessarily the obvious choice. There is also a reaction system, which means that both players stay involved all the time. There is never really a moment where one player plays and the other just watches. For movement, there is no real randomness on charges. The game is not decided by random charge distances. For shooting, as I explained earlier, you have the choice between using a hit-style roll or a wound-style roll. Basically, the defender chooses whether to resist the attack or avoid it. Melee uses the same system, so you do not need to learn a completely different mechanic. There are quite a few modifiers depending on the situation, both for shooting and close combat. I try to simplify them as much as possible to keep the game playable, but they make positioning, terrain, condition, and timing very strategic. The same thing applies to melee. Some situations are much more advantageous than others. I think this makes the game feel quite realistic, both strategically and psychologically. For example, units will rarely fight to the very last model. And when they do, they will usually be heavily weakened by that point. Large monsters are also not completely reliable. They're very powerful, of course, and you can activate a lot of points at once. Meanwhile, an opponent without big monsters may need several activations to use the same number of points. But big monsters also create a lot of uncertainty. They can suffer critical damages, and a huge, resistant monster with a lot of wounds can lose a quarter of its wounds and then be removed from the game because of a single critical damage roll, if unlucky. So they are dangerous, but they are not an unbeatable strategy. They make the game more fun for both players, but they also come with risks and counters. The game is designed to be very balanced. Morale is also important. Your troops will often start running away once they take losses. As I said, they usually do not fight to the last man. Losing your general can be catastrophic because it can trigger a panic roll, and there is a real chance that all your army may flee. Objectives are also designed to feel natural. There are no random objective cards or objectives that suddenly appear out of nowhere. Most scenarios start with basic objectives that are common to almost every battle. Then, depending on the scenario, secondary objectives can become active. Each one gives victory points. So, in general, you will need to destroy the enemy, kill characters, take positions, or gain control of the battlefield. That is what the objective system is trying to reflect: who is actually winning the battle. Sometimes, you may lose a lot of troops, but if you have taken control of most of the battlefield, that matters. Maybe your opponent had a strong firing line, so it was normal for you to lose troops while crossing the table. But if you now control the map, your opponent may no longer be in a good position to win. The system takes that kind of situation into account. Depending on the scenario, there are also main objectives that can give you more points if you achieve the specific goal of the mission. So the game stays quite dynamic. Terrain also works a bit differently from many other games. Here, you have terrain that cannot be crossed. Here, you have terrain that is part of the ground. Your units can walk on it, because it is basically part of the battlefield surface. And here, you have terrain that counts as a position. That means when your unit enters this kind of terrain, the terrain base effectively becomes the base of your unit for gameplay purposes. This makes combat around terrain much simpler. It saves a lot of time and avoids unnecessary positioning problems. So, if I had to summarize the main differences with other games, I would say that terrain management is very schematic, but in a good way. It saves time while keeping the game realistic and fun. The morale system is also quite realistic, and the combat system tries to capture the difference between avoiding an attack and resisting it. The use of round unit trays is also very useful. With these round trays, it is much easier to calculate distances between units accurately. And in game, that is really practical. It avoids those annoying moments where players argue over tiny measurement differences. So there we go. I hope this gave you a better idea of how the Proxy Wars website works, what you can do with it, and how you can start building an army to conquer the world.